Good afternoon, welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Tim Singleton with Strive IT. Take it away, Tim.
Thank you. So, show of hands, how many people have ever worked with or heard of an unfriendly or mean or arrogant IT guy? It's just about everybody. So, that's the consensus. That's the view of IT people. And 2005, I started Strive IT to try to counter that idea, to have to be friendly with clients and companies. The tagline we've been using is IT so friendly you'll almost want your computers to break. And it's great, and people like us, everybody's friendly, but every single time I talk to clients, they're frustrated and they're upset and they're angry, and of course, it's because their computers are down, their business isn't working in that part. So I was talking to some mentors and business coaches and colleagues, and what I came out with was that wasn't necessarily me or the people I'm working with, it's the business model. There are about 3 different models of IT support, and I'd like to tell you guys about those 3 today and which one might work for your company if you're looking for one. First model is hourly. This is the most common. This is where your computer breaks, you call your IT guy, you say, my computer's broken. He goes online or goes to your site, he fixes it, and bills you for the time that took. The advantages to that one, we'll go over advantages and disadvantages to each, are that you're only paying for the limited amount of time that he's working. So you know that he's not going out learning stuff on your time or getting certifications on your dollar. The other one is the IT bill you get at the end of the month tends to be the least expensive. Disadvantages to this, and this is honestly the most important thing, the whole talk. If you could only take one thing away, it's this. It costs you more to have IT problems than it costs you to fix IT problems. So if a computer goes down in any IT problem scenario, there's not only the cost of what the IT guy bills you to fix it. If it takes 2 hours to fix that computer, that's 2 hours of bill, but it's also 2 hours that computer was down, that the person that owned that computer wasn't working, that you're paying them to work. 2 hours that he's like over to his neighbor, decreasing morale, whining about how bad the computers are. If he's a sales guy, maybe he's missing phone calls, and there's all kinds of opportunity cost. So always think about when you're looking at IT costs, not only how much does it cost to fix it, but how much does it cost to have that problem. Another disadvantage to the hourly model is you can't budget for it. Anybody who's doing end-of-the-year budgeting says, okay, I've got 10 people in my company, I've got 15 computers for whatever reason. How much time are these computers going to be down next year? Nobody knows. There's no way to find that out. And so figuring out how much to budget for IT support is kind of impossible. It's not good for your business. There's money that you're setting aside you can't spend on marketing or sales. The incentives aren't really in alignment, and this was a big one for me. You as a company, your incentive with your computers, as soon as you call your IT guy on the phone, he's going to be charging you $150 an hour or whatever it is just to be on the phone with you. And so your incentive, whether you notice it or not, is sort of to wait until your problem gets so bad that it's definitely worth making that phone call. Maybe that's it's working 80% as well as it should be. Okay, now I'll call him. It's gotten bad enough. So you're working at 80% less efficiency. Maybe half your company is working at 80% less efficiency because they're all thinking the same thing. So all your company is now everybody's working less efficient. How is that affecting you in the competitive market? If your company's not doing as well because you're waiting for IT support. My incentive, or the IT provider's incentive, is to maybe draw out how long it takes to fix the problem, because he's getting billed hourly. Most people don't do this. Most people have ethics and morals, but it's always the thing in the back of your head, like, I know he's been here for a long time, and it seems like that should be an easy fix. Is he really, taking that long? Is that really? So it's not necessarily that he's trying to screw you over, but there's a lack of trust that just doesn't quite line up. And for me, that incentives part is pretty critical. And finally, they're not part of your company. You're not going to, when you're doing business planning at the end of the year, you're not going to bring them in at $150 an hour and say, hey, can you hang out with us for the day so we can tell you about our company goals and you can tell us whether our IT is right. Nobody's going to pay for that. So what you want is somebody in that role, sort of a business partner. What you've got is instead more of a plumber. You call him, he fixes it, he goes away. Nobody's real happy that he's there, but it's sort of a necessary evil. That's the hourly model. I don't like that one. Sometimes it's good, but in general, there's others. The second model is the in-house person. So whether it's a full-time in-house staff or somebody on your staff that's doing it, the advantage to this is that it's budgetable. You've already set aside money for this person's salary. You already know how much it's going to cost. You're effectively getting unlimited support for all your IT, and you know how much you're going to pay for it. So that's a big advantage. They're in your company, so they can be part of that planning meeting at the end of every year. They know your company's goals, your company's culture. They know where you're going, and can make better recommendations and have a better conversation about it. So that's nice. On the downside, a lot of times you'll have smaller companies that have sort of the office manager or the owner or an engineer in the back who's like, quote, good at the IT stuff. And so they say, here, you just take care of this. Now, that's nice because you're not paying any extra for it, but all of the time that he's spending fixing IT problems, he's not actually spending doing the job you hired him for or her for. That engineer is not doing engineering. That accountant isn't doing accountant or anything at that time. Not only that, they're not necessarily professionals at this. They're not getting their certifications every year. They're not talking to vendors and maintaining relationships and figuring out what's out there in the marketplace. It's just not their job. So you're sort of paying for kind of subpar IT support. It's not their fault. They have a better job to do. Also, if you have maybe one person doing this role, even if it's a full-time IT person, there's a single point of failure there. And a lot of times companies will say, okay, we're big enough, we can have one full-time IT guy or girl. And now if that person gets sick or goes on vacation or runs into a problem they can't figure out, they're stuck. There's no team behind them. Those are the first two. The final model for doing IT support is called managed services. IT companies that do this model, they're called managed service providers or MSPs. If you ever hear that term, that's what they're talking about. Advantages here is basically there's a lot of different MSPs that do a lot of different types of work, but the common denominator is they all give you unlimited support for some flat monthly fee. That's the general gist of it. You can budget for this. One of the advantages is it's very budgetable. It's just like having a full-time IT guy. If you know this is how much I'm paying every month for unlimited support, you can budget for that. It's really easy. It's better for your wallet and planning. The incentives are finally in alignment here, where since you've already paid for all the support you can possibly want, then you want to get your money's worth. And as soon as some little flicker comes up on your screen, you're not waiting for him anymore for 3 weeks for it to get bad. You're like, I've already paid you, fix this little flicker. And so all of a sudden, your whole network, not just your computer, everybody's computer is running higher efficiency. You're not waiting, everybody's not running at that 80% waiting for the IT guy to show up. My incentive is to get it fixed, or the IT person's, whoever you're working with, is to get it fixed soon, fast, well, so it doesn't recur the next time. So whoever you're paying this monthly fee to can just kind of sit back and enjoy the money you pay them. The incentives are more, again, who knows whether they're doing that, but the incentives are more in alignment, which is, it feels more honest to me. It feels like a better relationship to set up. Also, if I'm doing IT work and it's my incentive to make sure that problems don't happen over there, then I'm going to spend a lot of time doing preventative maintenance to make sure that problems don't happen. And if I can say 10 hours a week, 10 hours a month makes most of the problems go away, then all of a sudden I can budget time in the same way that I'm budgeting money. And I don't have to worry about unforeseen problems that come up later on because I've done a lot of proactive work to make sure that doesn't happen as often. So it's sort of everybody's in alignment with the best way to run that. Finally, you can ask them into your company for the business planning. They want to be there. They want to, IT companies, if you say, hey, we're doing business planning, we want to make sure our IT is in alignment with our goals for the next year, they want to make sure they're going to head off any bad ideas, or they're going to be able to put in suggestions for what you need. And often that's already paid for in your monthly fee, so they become that business partner that the hourly guy wasn't really. Disadvantages of the MSP model. It's not that great for big companies. If you have 200 people in your company, you should hire full-time IT staff. No question there. The IT bills that you get at the end of the month tend to be a little larger than the hourly bills. But again, since all that proactive work is happening, you're getting fewer problems. And so the cost for you as a company to handle your IT is actually going way down, even though it looks a little more expensive on your bill. Does that make sense? Cool. So there's the three models. I'd like to, basically, if you are running your business, you're curious what kind of model works best for you. They've all got their advantages. They've all got their disadvantages. Which one would be the best for you guys? Because it might be any one of them. Over my career, I've met with a lot of companies, either on sales calls, as clients, several hundred, I'm sure. And it seems like the way that most companies see investing comes down into two mindsets. It's either the growth mindset or the conservation mindset. Let me explain those. So the growth mindset, it's usually more faster growing companies. And like these companies ask, what is best for my company? They'll not so much, do I have to do this? Is this the best decision for my company? They'll look at investments, the right investments. They'll look at the right investments as a competitive advantage, not necessarily just something that I have to do because we have to do it. The conservation mindset, on the other side, asks more of, what can I get by with? Maybe I can just get away with having my engineer in the back room doing IT work. Maybe that's enough. And sort of at first blush, it might seem like this is a less wise stance to take, but there's definitely a place for it. Like if you have a strict budget that's dictated to you from above, you might not be able to make investment. You might just have to get away with or get by with somebody else doing the IT work. If you're a nonprofit, and all of the money that comes in needs to just go right back out to that social enterprise you're supporting, great. That's what you want to be doing. You don't necessarily need to invest in high IT. If you're about to make some big move in the marketplace, great. You want to save some money. You might need to invest a little bit differently. That's all fine. The thing we want to keep in mind though is that businesses these days run on IT. Most businesses anyway, if your computers all go down, your business stops. And so IT is actually an essential part of your company. Good IT can actually be a competitive advantage for you. Making sure you're up 100% of the time and your competitors are maybe up only 80% of the time, that's a competitive advantage for you in the market. It's an investment that I've found tends to pay off for good IT. Now, I run a small business. I run a growing small business. I'm very sensitive to cash flow. I get that making an investment like that, we've got this guy who can do this stuff. Why would it be a whole lot extra for somebody outside? I never want to be over-investing. I never want to be over-engineering in anything. I met with a potential client the other day, and they were spending $1,000 a month, 10 people in the company, just to have their computers monitored and for alerts to show up when something looked like it was going to go wrong. That's way too much, big overinvestment. I've been into companies where they've got 8 employees and 10 servers, or 10 employees and 8 servers. Like there's no need for that sort of thing. So overinvestment is possible. And in general, I find that underinvestment is far more prevalent than overinvestment. Most people underinvest in their IT. I'll give an example here. I had an engineering firm as a company, and they were growing. And they got a new employee, they got a new desk, they tossed the new desk in the corner with a new computer, but they didn't have a network port over there. And so they said, we're engineers, we can figure this out. Yeah, you can see where this is going. So they basically went to Best Buy and they got some equipment, they got a big long cable and they plugged it in and everything was working great. And their guy was getting on the internet, he could get to the server, no problem. Except for a couple hours later, they noticed that everybody else on the network couldn't get to his computer. And they were all sharing files, and they needed to get to his computer. So like, what's going on? Maybe the thing's not plugged in right. They're calling somebody over. I know this guy knows a bit about IT, and he's got this router at home. And after about 3 days of frustration, they called me in, and they're like, I don't know what's going on. This thing isn't connecting. And they had bought the wrong piece of equipment. So here's this company that's in a growth phase that should be having a growth mindset, and instead, like a lot of companies, they're actually working out of this conservative mindset, more of a conservation mindset. This is the kind of thing that happens. Every time I do the math on this, it seems to always work out. Like spending a little bit more on IT is way worth the value. And all of my clients that have made that leap, they all give me the same feedback that like this is so worth the investment I'm putting into it in the end. There's a doctor's office that I went into. I'll give you an example of the actual value. There's a doctor's office I took on. There was one woman she was in the admin department. Every time she logged in the morning, it took her computer about 30 minutes to work. So she'd put in her password and walk away for a half hour to get coffee, go hang out with the ladies next door, get some bagels, just because her computer took that long to log in. Now, I went in, she had asked her previous IT guy about this. He didn't know what it was. She just forgot about it, thought it was just her computer, the way it worked. She never asked me about it. I'm doing the proactive preventative maintenance, and I noticed some misconfiguration on her computer. I fixed it. I didn't even think a second thing. She never mentioned it to me. And she called me the next day. She's like, what happened? My computer booted right away. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, it's been taking a half hour every day. So let's assume she's making $50,000 a year, right? A half hour a day times 5 days. Her employer is paying like over $3,000 a year just to have her go grab coffee because her computer wasn't working right. Like, there's actually, it's a really clear example of like if you put in a little bit extra into IT support, you can actually make it up on the back end a whole lot. I know I'm running out of time. Let me just review sort of what we covered so far. So number one, most important thing, it costs more to have IT problems than to fix IT problems. Number two, if you can spend a little bit more upfront to do proactive preventative maintenance, which is what most managed service providers do or claim to, some are better than others at this, it's going to save you a whole lot of money in the long run, maybe not necessarily on your IT bill, but in those soft costs of opportunity costs, downtime, morale, things like that. And of the three, there's three real approaches to handling IT support. There's the in-house, which honestly, unless you've got either $150K extra to spend to hire a couple IT people, or you have some IT person, some employee that happens to work there that's really good at computers, that you don't care that they're not doing their job half the time, I wouldn't hire somebody in-house. If you do have somebody that's really good with computers and he only needs a part-time job anyway and you want to hire him full-time, okay. The second model is the hourly, which is come in, break it, fix it, they charge you for the time. That's actually the best, if you're looking to figure out which of these is best for you, if you have somebody in-house that's doing that, also hire some hourly guy, just so you can have a backup. If you've got a real tight budget, hire an hourly guy. It makes some sense, especially if you can then go to your board and say, hey, we weren't anticipating our server was going to crash this year. We need more money in the budget. If it works that way, then an hourly might be a way to go. For everybody else, I would definitely recommend managed service providers. And like I said, all the MSPs out there handle things a little differently. Some do really great proactive work. Some do less proactive work. If you're thinking about this and you're wondering how to hire, how to compare them against each other, go to my website, striveit.com. striveit.com. And there's a free report there you can download on how to, things you should know about interviewing and hiring a managed service provider. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So Tim, what does a typical day look like for you? I mean, is it mostly dealing with preventative or reacting to problems? I'm just curious what it looks like.
Yeah, so there's basically different roles in the company. There's a dedicated role set aside for handling reactive problems, because as they come in. There's a dedicated role set aside for preventative maintenance, automatically updating things, making sure we're looking at previous tickets and can we learn anything from those and automatically change them in advance. There's time spent doing making sure clients are actually in alignment with a giant set of best practices that we've developed over the years. And then actually meeting with clients and talking about their business goals and practices and what they're planning on doing in the upcoming year. That sort of throughout the company, that's all of the things that we do.
Okay.
Thanks.
So Tim, I run a small company with just 6 employees who have access and need to have access to our systems. But almost everything we do is a cloud-based application. But everybody still has their own mobile devices. We use a lot of mobile devices in the field, as well as their own desktop, laptop, computer. And it's a mix of Apples and Windows-based machines.
Okay.
Is there a role for an IT company like you in there? And what advice would you give me?
Yeah, absolutely. So having a server on site isn't necessary, especially these days, especially with smaller companies. Larger ones, 10, 15 and above, you'd want one. But all of the problems that happen to computers happen whether there's a server there or not. So antivirus, for instance, making sure your computers are all up to date, checking in, having a policy in place to make sure that the security is solid, sort of a layered security to keep you from getting infected with viruses, from getting ransomware in your computers. Making sure that your systems are being backed up. Even if they're in the cloud, a lot of cloud providers don't back up their software well. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be taken into account that can be a little bit more complicated because it's cloud-based, because you probably have a bunch of different cloud providers rather than just one single server to handle. So yeah, there's definitely some opportunity there that might help you out. If your computers are all going slow, whether you've got a server or not, you'll still want to make sure those are quick, so your guys out in the field can get what they need done fast and on to the next job.
So just to wrap it, can you support both the mobile devices as well as the laptops and desktops, and can you do both Apple and Windows-based machines?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for your presentation. My question is, because I'm self-employed, on my own, in my house, I don't depend on the computer very much for my job, but I do use it. I used to have free service for my husband's job to clean it up, etc. How is the best way for me to find somebody to come and work with me? Probably I would think hourly would be the model.
Hourly is definitely the model.
And there's a lot of people that, say they could do it, but what kind of questions should I ask and how do I find somebody?
I would say probably the best bet for this is start asking around. People who other massage therapists or friends, neighbors, like, hey, I've got this computer problem. Do you know anybody that does this sort of thing? I know people, but most of the people that I'm involved with and working with are focused on businesses, larger businesses with offices. There's apps out there. There's Craigslist. There's all places you can get random names, and most people that are out there doing this work for a living can handle most things that come up on an individual computer. So you're probably not going to need a lot of certifications or a ton of experience to get help. What you want to be looking out for is how friendly are they? How do they treat you? Do they seem honest? Referrals from friends, neighbors, that sort of thing.
You mentioned that on your website, you've got the information on what you look for a managed service provider.
Yeah.
Could you just maybe review, though, like the top 3 or 4 things that someone should look for?
Yeah, sure. Off the top of my head, you want to make sure that they're doing a lot of proactive work. In fact, ask them, aside from just installing a couple monitoring tools, what sort of proactive work do you do? Because a lot of companies they'll install a tool and it'll alert them when there's problems, but that's about it. The better ones will actually be doing review on all of their previous issues that other customers have had and say, okay, it looks like here's a problem that we're facing these days. Is there a common solution? Yes. Is there a common solution that we can apply to everybody's computer across the board before these come up so that problem doesn't happen? So if they have processes in place for proactive work, that's great. If they have processes in place in general, this is very important. Otherwise, it's you're not really dealing with the company as a whole, you're dealing with an individual technician. And if you happen to get the good tech or the bad tech on the phone, then it's just sort of luck of the draw. If the company has a lot of processes in place, then the whole company will act similarly, and so you can sort of have faith in that company going forward. The third one is, do they keep metrics? This is a really great way to compare IT companies. Everybody should be not only keeping track of all of the issues that they've handled and fixed, but how long it takes to fix them, how long it takes to get back to the client once they've called, all sorts of things. And there's, how long does it take, let's see, across, there's the particular metric, for instance, tickets per month per endpoint is one that I use. How many, across all of my clients, if we average everything out, how many tickets per month does every single user generate? For me, it's about a quarter. So on average, any given user will have a problem that they have to call in for about once every few months. That's a good way to compare like whether one company is really efficient in preventing problems from happening versus another one that's really good at firefighting but not necessarily preventing them. Those are a couple off the top of my head.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Tim. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.